Oh God.
So I think many of us have been there before. I have definitely bought something because I saw it on Instagram or another app. Today, I want to talk to you about how social media keeps you poor in 3 different ways. Attention poor, financially poor, and happiness poor. There's something that I notice that happens to me a lot when I use my phone. I'll pull it out and open it for a very specific purpose. Maybe I wanted to send someone a text or check the weather for the day. But as soon as I open up the phone, my mind goes almost numb. And before I know it, I'm scrolling through Instagram or something. And then I'll snap out of it and be like, what was I supposed to be doing? I'll completely forget. And then I'll just close my phone and kind of walk away and be like, oh well. Only to remember 5 minutes later that I was actually supposed to text someone back. I don't think that's very good, and I'm curious to know if something like that has ever happened to you. Social media is incredibly good at fragmenting our attention. I recently read about this study that was featured in the Harvard Business Review, and they talked about an effect that social media can have on people called brain drain. Now that to me kind of sounds like a Pokemon move or something. So the University of Texas set up this study where they had people sit in rooms and solve math and pattern recognition problems. And these problems basically test something called your fluid intelligence, which is your ability to reason and solve novel problems. Basically, they were trying to have people solve problems where you could do it much more effectively if you could focus your full attention on the problem. And now what they did next in the study was really interesting. They divided the people into 3 groups. Group 1 was told to leave their phones outside of the study room. Group 2 was allowed to either keep their phones in their pockets or in their bags with them. And then finally, Group 3 was actually told to place their phones face down on the table in front of them. Everyone's phones were either turned off or put on silent. And the results kind of disturbed me. And that's because they found that the group that had their phones on their desk in front of them performed much worse than the other 2 groups. And it was in effect similar to a lack of sleep. So basically, just the presence of a phone being in arm's reach was enough to put people into this almost sleep-deprived state. So I think brain drain sounds about right. Speaking of that, actually, I just remembered, you know the zombies from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time that would like jump on you and then start munching on your head? I just realized that they're probably trying to eat your brain, right? I guess that's what zombies kind of do. Just like the good old smartphone. But why does this happen? Why does our phones and social media absorb one of the most valuable resources we have, our attention? I looked into this a little further and it started to get really freaky. In psychology, there's something that is known as automatic processing. And this is basically anything that you do without having to really think about it. A good example would be somebody calling your name. As soon as you hear your name, you automatically turn your head towards wherever that sound came from without really even having to think about it, you just react. Well, the study I was talking about earlier made this connection. They said that our research suggests that in a way, the mere presence of our smartphones is like the sound of our names. They're constantly calling to us, exerting a gravitational pull on our attention. It's very creepy when you put it that way, and I think it's very true. So I believe we have a major problem here. Attention is one of our most important resources, and we have a limited amount that we can use every single day. And whatever we give our attention to during the day becomes a greater part of our lives. Our attention is kind of like the sun, but if it only pointed in one direction. Whatever area the sun points at would be filled with light and would grow, but the areas that the sun neglects would be cold and lifeless. I think our attention functions very much the same way. What exactly are we allowing to grow when we spend hours and hours looking at screens? And what are we leaving to be neglected in the dark? This brings us to the second way I believe social media keeps us poor. Our happiness. I'm sure many of you have heard the quote before, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Now, this was supposedly said by Roosevelt, but I'm not entirely sure if that's true. But regardless, I think that phrase has become a bit of a cliche at this point. Recently, I actually came across a phrase that I like better. Hike your own hike. On the Appalachian Trail and other long distance trails in the Americas and across the world, people started adopting this phrase because of a problem that they were noticing. When hikers happen to pass each other on the trail, they might sometimes stop to say hello and chat for a little bit. And inevitably, the conversation would often drift towards how many miles a particular person had hiked that day or what type of gear they had with them. And ultimately, this would lead towards comparison. You can't help but think, should I have hiked that extra couple miles? That person just did. Or, hey, maybe my backpack's a little bit too heavy. That ultralight dude that I just passed seemed to be walking pretty comfortably. And before you know it, you're feeling unhappy. But the whole point of hiking in the first place was to enjoy yourself, spend some solitude in nature. How did it turn into this mess of self-doubt? So to solve this problem, people started to repeat the phrase to themselves or to others. Hike your own hike. And basically what it means is to just travel at your own pace with what you brought with you, and most of all, to enjoy yourself. I like this phrase a lot because I think social media increasingly hides from us the fact that we are all hiking our own hikes in life. When you scroll through Instagram, it mashes everyone's lives together to make it look like we're all competing in the same ecosystem. You can't help but measuring yourself against what you see, and what you see is everyone's best attempts at presenting their best foot forward. I was actually listening to an episode of the Maddie and Pete show yesterday where Peter was talking about how sometimes he wished that he could just post a normal photo to Instagram.
I don't know, maybe it's just like in my head I've been moving towards wanting to post more like everyday normal stuff. And when I say normal stuff, because like I'm not on top of a mountain every day and I'm not in a boat on the high seas.
You don't live on the mountain?
I'm not hanging my feet off a dope bridge.
You don't have the jet ski on the
I
mountain?
don't even live near a mountain. And I'm just getting to the point where like I'd love to just post a picture like, hey, we're podcasting, bam, and fire it up. Oh, I long for that. But there's that OCD artsy side of my brain that's like, absolutely not,
No,
Peter.
you cannot.
What are you even thinking?
I think this hesitation he's talking about is something that we all feel, especially if you have a, very highly curated Instagram feed. Comparisons are useful, in my opinion, extremely important actually. It's how we make sense of our place in the world and understand information. But for most of our history, we only had our local environment to compare ourselves to. Maybe it was our tribe or our village. At this scale, we could probably make healthy and useful comparisons to one another. But with social media, our tribe has become the whole world, and an inaccurate portrayal of the whole world at that. And when we compare ourselves to this, we can't help but feel inadequate. This is where we arrive at the third way that social media keeps us poor: financially. When we're in the vulnerable state of being unhappy or feeling inadequate, we are much more susceptible to influence. Wow, look at these people wearing these great outfits. They look so cool. How come I don't look that cool? Maybe if I just had these clothes, then I would feel confident about myself. I'll be the first person to admit that I've bought something because I saw it on social media. And hey, sometimes those are actually great purchases that I'm really happy with. I think these tools in our hands are borderline miraculous in what they allow us to do. But what started out as a benevolent idea has increasingly become more geared towards manipulating our attention, happiness, and money. I think history shows that we have a tendency to come up with really great ideas that solve massive problems and propel humanity forwards in big ways. But then over time, our tendency towards things like greed starts to destroy the wholesomeness of that original idea. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I want to be rich, but not exactly in the way that that term generally implies. Of course, I want to be financially comfortable, but perhaps even more than that, I want to be rich in attention and rich in happiness. And so this year, I'm going to be making an effort to refine my relationship with my phone and with technology more. Don't worry, it doesn't mean you'll never see me on Instagram or anything like that. It just means I'm thinking about how I want to use these tools given the context of what I've been exploring lately. I just got a new roll of film for this guy again recently, and I'm really excited to take it out for a spin. I think there's something really special about the analog version of some of the things that we have in our lives. Using a camera like this doesn't necessarily take you away to some other place. There's no screen to immerse yourself in. If anything, it actually brings you more into the moment. A moment that I know has my full attention.